Correctional Services Department is probing claims that Dr Nandipha Magudumana was assaulted at the Kroonstad prison. It's been reported that the incident with an inmate who is a Sangoma emanated from singing and a prayer session at the Free State facility. The department says it's investigating the circumstances surrounding the incident. Magudumana's lawyers have confirmed that a case of grievous bodily harm has been laid with the police. The department says Thabo Beste's alleged jailbreak accomplice was examined, but no visible injuries were found. All right, let's get some detail on this now. Correctional Services spokesperson Singabakho Nxumalo joins us now for more on that. Zuida, good to have you, and thank you very much for coming on. Is it an unusual occurrence for inmates to, I suppose, in time to time, be involved in such altercations?
Very good evening, and thank you for having us. Correctional facilities are closed spaces, and that's where you find a group of individuals occupying those spaces. So from time to time, you may experience quarrels or other things, but our officials are there to maintain order. But the inmates also have a duty to make it a point that they make that environment conducive for all of them, and we disapprove any forms of disturbances. But coming through this incident involving Nandipha Magudumana, we only alerted today that there was an incident there, and the preliminary probing that was brought to us is that Nandipha did report that was an incident, but it didn't happen in her cell. It happened in another cell. That is a female correctional center which allows inmates to move from one cell to another. But when Nandipha is kept, there is only 2 cells there. So the investigation will then assist us to then understand what was then supposed to be a prayer session, how come it ended up having altercations, people being pushed against the corridors, and all those details. So that would be our focus as a department.
It's a highly secured environment. What's a standard operating procedure when instances of this nature happens?
What happened there is exactly what is expected of our correctional officials, that when they hear that there is some disturbing noise or anything happening in whatever section of the facility, they rush there to check what is happening. And hence, when this particular incident happened, Nandipha was asked what happened. She then said no, she was allegedly assaulted, and then she was then taken to the healthcare facility inside that center, where an examination was done and there were no visible signs of injuries. But then she was then asked if she would want to open a criminal case because she was fearing that she was attacked. And then she said no, instead she would want to engage with her lawyers. It's her right to do that. But as a department, we then probe to say what really happened there. So that investigation is continuing so that we really get to understand. Because when inmates move from their cells to other cells, and then something happens there, then it means it's something that ought to then be looked into quite closely, because other inmates in those cells may prefer the things to be done in another way. Yeah. Hence, then you ought to investigate.
Some of the reports that we are reading is that her lawyers are going to want to use this, I suppose, as motivation for her to be moved to another cell. Could an incident of this nature be a justification for her being moved to a different cell, I suppose, as to where she is now?
When inmates are admitted in correctional facilities, they are assessed. And upon the completion of that assessment, they are then placed in cells which are suitable for their conditions and for whatever special needs that may have been identified. I think sometime last year, you may remember, we took the media to that particular facility because there were a whole lot of questions being asked. Even after that tour, we were blamed to say we are giving Nandipha Magudumana preferential treatment. Why is being held in that specific section of the facility? And we did explain that She does a lot of engagement with lawyers, and also we cannot ignore the fact that she does hold an elevated public profile. So if you take her into a criminal cell, there is a risk involved there. So where Nandipha is kept currently is the condition that was identified upon the assessment that was conducted. So if that is to be looked into, the investigation will advise us. But as a department, we've got tools that we use that assist us in determining where an inmate is to be kept. It's not a matter of saying an inmate feels that his or her life is threatened here, therefore move this inmate to this particular facility, or even move an inmate to another region completely. There is a tool, and that tool does work for us.
All right. Let's talk about the tools. And I'm sure there is a code of conduct, as you're saying. The inmates in a facility like that, a women's prison, they are allowed to move from one cell to another, be it for religious gatherings. Is there a code of conduct that then would govern how that should happen? And are you able to then, from your investigation, deduce whether or not that code of conduct would have been breached?
We do have standard operating procedures as a department, and those procedures talk to what is expected of our officials and also what is expected of inmates. And when there is a deviation, what needs to be taken in terms of corrective measures, but they also determine how to handle any cases that may occur from time to time, because it's confined spaces. Should something happen, we ought to have sufficient flexibility to respond in that particular case. So even with this particular incident, the reason why we're investigating, because we want to know what really happened on that Saturday. At what time did Nandipha Magudumana move to the other cell?
Yeah. And
all that we have at this stage is that it was for a prayer gathering. So we have to test, was it for a prayer gathering? Yeah. And what happened when they were in that specific cell. So those details are very important.
So for consistency and predictability, here's what I'm leading to. I'm leading to a question that says if there's a breach of the code of conduct, there are sanctions that are attached to that. Of course, laying of a criminal charge is a completely separate matter that would have to go through those processes. But in terms of the breach of that code of conduct, what are the sanctions that are attached to that?
Some of the basic things. If you are to move from your cell to another cell, there ought to be reasons for that. And here, if the reasons are that it was for a prayer session, it ought to have been approved by the head in that specific unit, that at this particular hour, inmates are allowed to gather in one cell for a prayer session. And how long is that prayer session supposed to be, and how that prayer session is to be conducted. So there are then those regulations, and the head of the center will have to make sure that there's consistency and that they are being applied and that there is enforcement. The officials on duty then must make it a point that they monitor that particular process. So as a department, the investigation will also lead us to that, to say, were those standard operating procedures followed, and if there was a breach, when did it occur? Who are the people involved? And what steps ought to be taken? But at this stage, we cannot preempt to predict if indeed there was a breach.
Yeah. Zwide, how long do those processes take? I mean, we tend to speak to you from now and again when there's a breach, where there's contraband that is being found, where there are claims of entertainment being brought in illegally. And you always say, well, we are conducting an investigation. I have not heard you come back to us and say this is what the investigation has produced. And I suppose this is one that certainly will be on the eye of many to find out what actually happened.
Because the houses move from one story to another. By the time we're done with the investigation, they say, here's a report. Nobody really took care much except for our, structures and the other bodies, such as the watchdog bodies like your JICs and other institutions. But all those investigations are necessary because they then inform us in future things that we ought to look out for and things to avoid. So they do assist us a lot. But we're always available to divulge, the findings of those investigations on condition that they will not threaten our security. But as a department, we do conduct these investigations. Some of them, yes, they do take time, but once we are done with them, the findings are always there.
Appreciate your time. Correctional Services spokesperson there, Singabakho Nxumalo.